Hello, everyone, and inside today's Locked On Canadiens is Marc Bergevin on the move again and the next part in our 5-year series.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1069.
Nice.
Of Locked On Canadiens. We are your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day of the week, wherever you listen to your daily podcast, Google, Apple, Spotify, and beyond, or on youtube.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and make every moment more, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. And you might be wondering, who the hell is this guy talking to me? I am Scott Matla. I'm one of your hosts on this podcast. I'm joined, as always, by the active stick, Laura Saba. And Laura, we were originally going to wrap our entire 5-year plan series up in today's show. But like we said, if there's news, we're going to talk about it. And this is news that I guess isn't so much a direct impact on the Canadiens. It's very, how does this affect the Leafs of the Canadiens, so to speak here? But it was something that we can't really ignore because it is a first major potential opportunity for some of the former regime getting new jobs. And it's a big enough name that we would be remiss if we kind of didn't touch on it. Maybe what Columbus fans would expect, what we would expect from this, but spoiled two things in there. One, first thing this morning, it was reported that for the open Columbus general manager position, Marc Bergevin is one of the parties being readily considered for this job. As of right now, he is still senior advisor to LA Kings general manager Rob Blake. Kings fans not super thrilled about that in general, I think. Just look at their responses to PLD. And if he were to go to Columbus, he would reunite with his former AGM and head of scouting, Trevor Timmins. And Laura, how do we feel about Marc Bergevin back in the GM seat of an NHL franchise?
I have so many feelings about this. I have so many thoughts. Okay, first of all, Trevor Timmins, I don't know if he's going to love this development, because I think general consensus is at this point, we've had a couple of years away from it. When the Canadiens picked Logan Mailloux and were roundly criticized for it, Marc Bergevin threw Trevor Timmins to the Wolves to take questions when the decision was ultimately his. It looked like the optics of it were obviously, and Trevor Timmins did not perform well under that pressure, but the optics of it looked like he was throwing Trevor Timmins under the bus, essentially. And very shortly thereafter, he ended up losing his job. So I personally, I don't think that Trevor Timmins will be happy about this. How I feel about it is, as long as it's not my team anymore, he can do whatever he wants, but the fact that he did not take accountability for decision making, I don't think is I don't necessarily feel like you should be able to just have any opportunity following that. The other thing too is that I didn't love his decisions. Yes, it is true that under Bergevin, the Montreal Canadiens made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Yes, it is true that in that moment, he made a lot of sacrifices, brought on some veterans, et cetera, and it ended up working out. But there were a lot of questionable decisions. He was married too long to a certain coach, not long enough to another coach, and then put somebody in the position that maybe shouldn't have been there. And then it was just it was an entire mess. And you look at some of the drafting decisions they made that didn't pan out. You look at a lot of the long-term implications of some of the contracts the Montreal Canadiens are still saddled with. Personally, to me, thanks for the memories, but that's the only thing I'm thanking Marc Bergevin for. I really, when you look at his tenure, the Montreal Canadiens had a chance, they had a shot, they had a core they could have worked with. They could have built on that core. They squandered that opportunity. They squandered Carey Price's prime. It just did not work, right? So for me, as a Canadiens fan, as long as it's not my team, but at the same time, We love and adore our beautiful English boy, Jay Foster of Locked On Blue Jackets, and we do not wish this upon Locked On Blue Jackets.
Because I tweeted earlier that I feel sorry for Blue Jackets fans with this, and I want to kind of clarify that because there are a lot of ways to look at Marc Bergevin's tenure in Montreal. It is complicated, and I know that seems like a cop-out, but it is. This was a team that was hot trash when he took it over. Admittedly, a team that should have bounced back because injuries, Carey Price was hurt and everything, and they did so, and they had a strong core, like you said. He did some things in trades that were very well managed, well thought out, and had lasting positive impacts long-term in Montreal. You have maybe not Thomas Vanek, but he got Thomas Vanek for next to nothing. Good, smart move. Got Carey Price signed long-term, did a couple of things there that made a lot of sense. Extended Max Pacioretty, signed PK Subban to a contract that he immediately backed out of and traded him. Kept other pieces here. He added Jeff Petrie for literally nothing. He added Philip Deneau for literally nothing. Key pieces of a Stanley Cup run. The drafting did leave some to be desired, and I don't know how much of that was his input. We saw it in the Michael McCarron draft after they were beat up by Ottawa in 2013, and how much was a shift in philosophy. Because I look at what Columbus has done since Trevor Timmins has gotten there, and they seem to be making really smart draft picks, skillful draft picks, underrated players there. If Trevor Timmins is allowed to do his job in Columbus, which with Marc Bergevin, who knows, it might work out. But I look at this and I go, he will probably get that franchise back on the right track with all the credit he's going to get for the team just being healthy again. Just like he did in Montreal, is that team was injured, beat up really bad, and then everyone got healthy, bounced back, and they were one of the better teams in their division. And the new guy who comes in always gets the credit for that. Marc Bergevin can absolutely be that piece for them. He can help steady the ship. Long term, this is not likely a good solution here. You will be a third place in your division team in the playoffs. After that, it's a crapshoot. You might go to the conference final. You might lose in 4 games in the first round. It's unknown. It's going to be interesting because then, one, what does him being there mean? What does it mean for guys like Johnny Gaudreau? What does it mean for some of these skill players, like Patrick Laine, guys that don't fit the bill of Bergevin, basically? Here is that. I'm really interested to see what becomes of this. I don't think they're going to go with him for Jay's sake and our few Blue Jackets friends and listeners. I hope that is also not the case because I think that, again, he'll get credit for something that he really didn't have anything to do with. He might come in, the team gets healthy and goes to the playoffs, and they're going to be like, Marc Bergevin's a genius. He's so much better than Jarmo. Being better than a guy who was terrible at his job doesn't mean a damn thing, to be quite honest. And also, for the love of God, hire literally any new people for any role whatsoever. Montreal proved you can do that, and they're the Canadiens. They're the oldest team in the league, and if they can do it, you can do it too. I promise.
They should hire me.
Yeah, hire Laura. I don't know what her stance is on free agency and advanced stats, but the hair is going to be phenomenal on this team. Laura, do we have any parting thoughts on the potential Bergevin to Columbus rumors?
I realized I was fairly harsh in my description of him, and I just wanted to be clear. It's not that I did not appreciate those flash in the pan fun years where they went, almost got to conference finals or whatever it is. It's not that. It's just that I feel like the team had a chance to be better than mediocre for a long period of time, right? They could have, instead of having sustained mediocrity, there could have been good. And that's the issue that I have. And a lot of times he didn't really take accountability for a lot of stuff, being like, well, it's hard to make trades. Then it was it's hard to get free agents. It's hard to, so all of that, all those platitudes and stuff like that. And you look at Kent Hughes, and he's patient. He waits for the return he wants, and then he gets the return he wants. Sometimes I have questions about the players that they are interested in or choose or bring over. I do have a lot of questions, and sometimes it works out. But The one thing with Kent Hughes is that he's not going to be afraid to be bold, and he's not going to be afraid to hold out until he gets the return he wants.
Yes. Obviously, if that does happen, we will probably be on Locked On Blue Jackets to talk about all of this ad nauseum again. But it is time for part 2 of our Canadiens over the next 5 years series. And we're going to dip into year 3 there, and that's coming up next. But first, today's show is also brought to you by the folks at Policygenius. It is hard to think about insurance and to think about all these things further on in life there. It is hard to sift through it all to know what you need, what your family needs, and what everyone else needs for life insurance beyond that. But can let you know right now, Policygenius can help you square all that away, because with Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at $292 per year for $1 million worth of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. They are on hand at Policygenius to walk you through the entire process there with their team of licensed experts, and they will guide you through everything so you can compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to ensure the lowest price to you. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens. I am, of course, Scott Malla. I'm joined as always by the active stick, Laura Saba. We have a very special prospect mailbag for our Thursday night recording for Friday. So please send us all of your prospect and draft questions. We have a very special guest coming on for that. And we know y'all love draft content. So guess what? You're going to get draft content this week, whether you like it or not. We know that you like this. But we have to shift into the series that my co-host came up with this week is the Canadiens over the next 5 years. Because if we're counting the end of this season, the 23-24 season, as a flagstone, capstone. Anyways, if we're metaphoring
a mile marker,
if we're metaphoring the 23-24 season into something here, what do the next 5 years look like? We talked about years 1 and 2 in yesterday's episode, and we kind of concluded that at the end of year 2, so 2 years from now, not next season, the season after that, they should be a playoff team, or something has gone wrong and you start asking the question of a lot of people.
Right.
3 years from now. Yes. So we are now going to be in the 27-28 season.
Yes. Yes.
If my math is correct, the question then becomes, can they win a division title at that point? And this is hard because we're looking really, really, really far into the future here, relatively speaking, is that 3 years is a long time. A lot of things can happen.
Change.
Yes. And that's not just with the Canadiens too. You look at around the division, Toronto, John Tavares, if he's re-signed, is going to be much older. Austin Matthews, whatever's left of Mitch Marner that hasn't been eaten by rabid raccoons. William Nylander, if they're all still there.
If William Nylander is still there.
It's more Mitch Marner than anyways, that's an entirely different episode. But what do they look like? What do the Bruins look like? What does Tampa Bay look like? What do all the other teams in this division look like that were a little bit older than the Montreal Canadiens? Because the Habs are going to shed some of these older contracts in the next 2 years. In 3 years, it's very hard to know what this full division is going to look like. But the Bruins should be on their way down. They don't have the prospect pool to rebound quickly on this. Same with Tampa Bay. Florida could be hit or miss. They could have some longevity over the next couple of years. They seem to be doing that. And Toronto is up to that core. If they start aging out, it's anybody's game. And even Buffalo, their current star player, Tage Thompson, is a little bit older. 3 years' time and injuries and slowing down and all this, things change. So, Laura, my question is, in 3 years, do you see the Montreal Canadiens as division title contenders?
Contenders, yes. Favorites, no. My prediction is that it is going to be, you are going to see Montreal up there. You are going to see them progress to the point where it's not out of the realm of possibility. And honestly, I think that it's going to be one of those things where it's like Buffalo, Detroit, and Montreal are going to have an emergence at the same time. Like, I refuse to acknowledge Ottawa as an entity in general, but you're looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs, like they'll still be like middle of the pack at that point. It's not like they're going to be an abject disaster. They're going to be on their way down. That core is going to have to be broken up, I think. It's not going to remain as is. And they still haven't figured out what the problem is with them, right? So I don't have a lot of faith in that. With Tampa and Boston, it's just that I think they just don't have that prospect depth like you mentioned. But a Buffalo, like I'm impressed with the way the Buffalo front office has handled the last couple of drafts. I think to me, like they're very smart about that. So it is going to be a competition for the Canadians. And I realize I'm rambling a little bit, but I have a lot of faith in what Buffalo's doing if they don't end up falling flat on their own faces. They trip all over themselves. But the front office decision making when it comes to scouting is great. Same thing with the Montreal Canadiens. Like right now, I feel like they have something, they have a vision, they're going to implement it. I'm not really sure what Detroit's vision is, but they seem to be continuing to get better. Probably I'm not on the timetable that our Detroit friends want, but I don't see it. I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility that they will contend for the division. And I think that's the point, right? Like we talked about how like in year 2 on our last episode, in year 2, we expect them to make the playoffs, but it could be one of those things where like, they made the playoffs and then they just last one round, they learned some lessons. But then at this point, we're in year 3, it's going to be the second year of them making the playoffs. And we want some noise. We want them to scare other teams.
And in 3 years' time, looking at this draft and next year's, going into next season, not which would be I can hear my Bruins neighbors yelling and screaming, so my apologies for that. Is that all these picks, multiple first-round picks over the next 2 years, this year and next year, all of those pieces are going to be coming to roost. And one of those is the Flames pick. The Flames might be terrible next year. That pick is no longer lottery protected after this season, I believe. I have to go read the Monahan trade thing again just to make sure on that. But the potential for the Canadiens to be adding first-round picks, 4 of them, plus the other names in there. Owen Beck will be more mature by that point. Lane Hudson, David Reinbacher, Logan Mailloux, Bogdan Konyushkov, Adam Engstrom, whomever. You're going to have all of these pieces that have been seasoned by an actual chef, and they're going to be ready. They're either going to be ready or they're not. And you're going to have an answer at that point that if all of these guys, and this is a huge maybe, hit their ceiling that we think they could be at, you're looking at a scary deep team here. You're going to have good players on it playing less minutes just because there's not space for everybody. You're going to have an older Nick Suzuki, a wiser Nick Suzuki, a wiser Cole Caulfield, a more battle-tested Uri Slavkovsky, and all these other pieces that are going to add here, plus a cap going up. We don't know what Ken Hughes is going to do when he's aggressive. He might trade for Sidney Crosby for all we know, which, awesome. In 3 years' time, assuming, and again, I know assuming and this and that, if things break the way history has shown us with aging curves and player decline and stuff, you're going to see the Canadiens be one of those teams rising when the current empires are on their way down. Tampa is on the decline. Boston, despite being good, has an aging core, a lack of depth, a lack of prospects. That empire is going to decline. Toronto's whatever that is going to decline at some point. They might finally win some rounds before that point, maybe, because the odds have to go their way sooner or later. But is it going to be too late for that window there? And elite players last a lot longer than non-elite players. But everything is lining up that if the Canadiens continue this upward trajectory, they should very easily be a team that could be punching at the top of that division there. Toronto might still be there just because elite players last a while. Buffalo might be there because, like you said, all those draft picks. It might be Detroit because Detroit seemingly has been just they're
progressing.
They are slow roasting a prime rib apparently in there, and that maybe it'll be good. Maybe it'll taste like crap. Who knows? but there's no clear shakeout here of how this is going to be the leader in this division here for a long, long time, just because players will fall off. Connor McDavid's almost 30. He's been in the league for 9 seasons. Austin Matthews has been in the league for 8 years. There's a lot of players that have been dominant for a long time now that are going to be exiting what their statistical prime normally would be and slowly start declining, less than because of elite players, but the Canadiens can take advantage of that. If they fill in, because they have all these picks, all these potential quality players, slamming pieces in there that fit and have been tested, you're looking at something potentially very special. We do have to get into the last part where it becomes very fun. When should we expect this team to be a Stanley Cup contender? Is that year 4, or are we rushing things a little bit? And we're going to jump into that coming up next. But first, as I said off the top of the show, today's show is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel, and it's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home the biggest win of your own, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's just a $5 bet to win $150. Bet on spreads, moneyline, player props, and more in there. Do you think the Oilers are going to finally be able to beat an AHL goalie? Is their goalie going to have a save percentage over 900? Put $5 on it. You're going to win $150 if you're right. And who knows? You're smart enough to be. You listen to this podcast after all. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens. We are into year 4 of the 5-year, I don't want to say plan, because we didn't actually plan anything. We're just talking about content on this show. For year 3, we are hoping that this is a team that is pushing to the top of the Atlantic Division. Whether that comes true or not depends on player development and players taking that next step forward, and this year not being flash in the pan and everything else. So the next step after being a division title winning team and being a certified playoff team, not a flash in the pan playoff team, a certified playoff team. When do we expect this team to actually be a cup contender is the real question, because that feels like the hardest part to nail down on all of this. You can win a division title, you can be a playoff team, but it is so hard to not only win rounds in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but also win a Stanley Cup. The Canadiens getting there in 2021 was next to improbable, quite frankly. And they did that with an elite all-world goalie. 4 years into this, starting next year, 5-year of the future, I don't want to say they should be a cup contender by year 4, but I feel like by the time they get to that 4th year, you're going to have your prospects established. You should be that team that when they look at the playoff matchups, they go, I don't want to play that team. I don't want to match up against Nick Suzuki and Kirby Dach and Owen Beck and Sidney Crosby. I don't want to do that.
Right.
I don't want to face Jacob Fowler in the playoffs.
Right.
I don't know if I'm jumping the gun by saying that.
No.
So I'm curious on your thoughts, Laura.
And that's the thing, because I think, we're saying when should this team be a cup contender? I think 4th year, we're talking 4th year from today. Like you got to think about that as 6th year in the rebuild, right? So I don't want this team to be the kind of team that is good once, right? One run. That's not it. That's not what this management wants. They don't want to sacrifice long-term success for short-term wins. And I believe that that's how they're going to approach it. And it's exactly like you said, Scott. Like, I see this team, like, they might not necessarily be doing that cup run. Like, maybe they flame out in the 2nd round. We don't know. But you definitely want them to be the team being like, no, thank you. I would like this other team instead, right? You want them to be a team that nobody likes playing, not because of shenanigans, but nobody likes playing because they're just so good that you know that you're going to be sacrificing 2 points every night, right? So when we're talking about the playoffs, they have to be a threat. Like, to me, it's like, oh no, They have to work hard to counter that. Like a coach has to be really smart to win against the Canadiens. They have so much depth that it's, you have your hands full with them every night. So that's the kind of thing I want, and I want that to happen. Like I want it to start in year 3, and I want it to just build, right? And they should always be a team where we don't count them out, because playoff runs, you never know, right? Like you run into a hot goalie, something happens, right? Like we watch teams that we predict will win the cup end up losing in the first round so many times. And then we watch teams being like, this team will never last in the playoffs. And they end up either going to the final or actually winning the whole thing. Right. So, like, we can't account for luck and those kinds of circumstances in the playoffs. But at the very least, every single time they make the playoffs, we should have an expectation that it's going to be good. Like, we should have a reasonable expectation being like, this team could win the cup. They got to go through a lot of obstacles to do it, but they could win the cup.
And that's the thing, is that only one team can win the cup every single year. And we know it's hard. It is so hard to win a championship in any sport. It is especially hard in the sport of hockey, where we've seen series, the 2010 Canadiens just get obliterated in every statistical measure and win because their 7th round draft pick goalie decided to be the reincarnation of Ken Dryden for a couple of rounds. It is so hard to predict which team will be a true dyed-in-the-wool cup contender here. I look at the Carolina Hurricanes every year. They are built smart on defense in the forward group. They are well coached. Their coach likes to complain about penalties, and sometimes they have a good goaltender too. And then they fail to make it close. And we make fun of Toronto, but every year it's like, this should be a team on their elite talent alone that should be advancing beyond the first round. And then they don't. It is so hard to predict. And the Canadiens, we don't know even what they're going to look like next year, let alone 4 years from now or 4 seasons from now. Is Kirby Dach going to improve? Is he going to be that guy? Is that going to be a bust? Who knows? Is Alex Newhook going to improve? Are all these prospects going to hit? If I had a crystal ball and I knew, I wouldn't be hosting this podcast, to be quite honest. I'd be telling you all to use FanDuel to, bet the money line on this, that, and the other thing until I get investigated. It is so hard to see that future there. We want to believe, because we are Canadiens fans, and I want to make that very clear. We are not full-fledged media members. We are not analysts paid by The Athletic or whomever. We are fans of this team who like to have insight and look at what they are doing. We believe in what Kent Hughes is doing with this team in terms of player development and building a proper team, and what Martin St. Louis is doing behind the bench. All of those things make me believe that, yes, this could absolutely be a cup contending team here. Things just have to break the right way. And it is impossible to know that that is going to happen. I would love it if they do. I would love to see the Canadiens lift another Stanley Cup in my lifetime. I don't want to be Rangers fans who haven't celebrated in 30 years. I know as Canadiens fans, we haven't celebrated in 31 years, but that's not the point of this. I don't want to be a team whose glory days were back when TVs were in 240p. I don't want to be a team that hasn't. I want to be able to see my franchise lift a Stanley Cup again. I've watched my baseball team win World Series. I've watched them break the most famous curse in all of sports. And it was glorious. It was cathartic. Yeah. I've watched my football team win multiple Super Bowls. I watched my soccer team qualify for the Champions League today for the first time in my lifetime. I want to believe in this Canadiens team. And I do believe in this Canadiens team that if everything continues the way that it looks like it is, and this is absolutely rose-tinted glasses, I'm not going to pretend that they're not. Everything makes sense with the way the division is going, the way the Canadiens are treating this, and the way that this staff seems to get it.
Right.
That this can be a cup contending team.
And the last thing I'll say is with this is that, Scott, you did say, like, we can't control a lot of things. We're not going to be able to control luck, injuries, officiating, all of that. But at the end of the day, whether or not they win a cup, like, this management team should be looking at this group and saying, and that includes front office and all kinds of other personnel, right? Did we maximize every opportunity we had to make it happen? If you try and you make the right decisions and it doesn't work out for luck reasons, that's one thing. But if you squander opportunities, if you screw up people's developments, if you take on ridiculous contracts for no reason because you want to reward a player like for whatever, or if you don't give $500,000 extra dollars per year to a player that was really a significant part of your defensive, like anything, strategy, play, anything, when you make those decisions, like the management team should step back and say, all right, we've been in place for 10 years. Let's say we bring it full circle with the Marc Bergevin conversation. We've been on this team for 10 years. Maybe we didn't win a cup. Maybe we came close. But did we do every possible thing at every moment to maximize our chance of getting that cup? I know it's not the same as winning, but for me, that's all I ask for from this team. So like for me in year 4, for this team to be a scary team, it's more, it shows that they're on the right track to becoming a perennial contender. And I know we're going to talk about year 5 tomorrow, so make sure you are tuned into that. Sorry, Scott.
Here's the thing is, yeah, we have year 5 tomorrow. We'll recap the whole thing. We'll check in on other news around there. Maybe we'll take a look at
questions.
Some mailbags. We will, yes, send those for Thursday. I realized that was a leading question, not a statement.
No, we still have some other mailbag questions to talk about. But if it's a prospect-specific question, ask it because.
Yes. And we will also take a look at maybe some of the mock drafts that are out there. Maybe that'll help people feel a little bit better about where they're at right now. But as always, you can follow us on Twitter at @LO_Canadiens, LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com. Follow Laura at The Active Stick. Follow myself at Scott Matla. Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you get your daily podcasts. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.